Yay! Is everybody still available for a second segment
Yes,
or no? Yes? No? Yep. All right. Well, then what we'll
I'm
do,
not.
you're not?
I'm not. I have to get back in the club.
Okay. Well, we love you just the same.
Madison, bye.
Bye. Later, everybody.
Back in the club, man. Get back in there.
We're
Yeah,
going to
back
talk
to work.
about people having sex and romantic relationships with their teachers. And when we say their teachers, we're not making it inclusive only of their school teacher. We're talking about their priest. We're talking about their guitar teacher. We're talking about any adult who's in a position of power and prominence that uses that position to say, hey, what do you think about coming on up to the house this weekend? And whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop-de. And I blame it on the adult because the adult should have more responsibility, right? That's why you're the teacher. If you are romancing your 14-year-old student and you're a 34-year-old man or woman, I think there is an essential problem with that. So let's get started with the show. Hey guys, it's a Sunday night edition. Welcome our guests tonight, January Ginger, Dorothea Geist, and Eric Kelly. Our topic is one of much heated discussion because it seems like this used to be a really bad thing, like in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and then a little gray area in the 80s and the 90s. And now it's become like, oh, it's a slap on the hand. So you were sleeping with your 14-year-old student? Yeah, give him 2 years in jail. No big deal. You can work it out, right? So we want to talk about teachers that sleep with their students. Number one question for everybody, is there anybody who thinks this is okay under any circumstance?
I think it depends on the age and what you're teaching.
The age and what you're teaching, you can't leave us just like that. Tell us why.
You gave examples of like musical instruments and stuff like that. If you are a 34-year-old teacher and you're teaching a 30-year-old student, then you got to be, I don't see.
Yeah, okay. But even in that scenario, wouldn't you think that if you were a 34-year-old teacher, you're in the position to not cross that line of fraternization? It's like, well, I'm a 50-year-old record producer and I'm working with a 45-year-old singer and I want to have sex, bro. I want to get laid. Yeah, but
Okay,
not
well,
with that singer. You got to find another person to get laid with, right?
No, not necessarily.
Well,
I would say not every
50 and 45.
But I coach piano, songwriting, vocals, and life coaching. So, you know, obviously I've been in this situation, or I've potentially been in this situation. And I always first, you know, try to keep my actions above reproach because I'm a professional, for one. But there was a situation where I was friends with someone first for a long time. And then later, he wanted to take piano lessons from me. And then years after that, he pursued me, dating me. So I hadn't been teaching him for a while. So is it like, oh, well, as long as you're not an active teacher? But then the thing is that we didn't date long. And then later on, he wanted to hire me as a life coach because he knew me well enough as a friend and, you know, the value of the things that I do, that it made sense for him to come to me for that reason. And he really benefited from my life experience. So it's not always black and white. And just as a quick second example, I knew somebody, a really good friend of mine in the past, who was a professor at a university and liked his student and she liked him. I think she even tried to initiate things. There was quite an age gap, but she was well above 21. And, you know, so they're two consenting adults, and they did wait to pursue something like romantically until after she was out of the class. So I think there's a way to go about it that's definitely more copacetic. But had he engaged while they were in class, I think there definitely would have been problems there.
Eric,
it's kind of strange. I know, me personally, you know, so when I was you know, I was out of college, I was 26 years old, and I was working at the YMCA doing a bunch of stuff, and they asked me to coach this girls' basketball team. And, these were like 6th, 7th, 8th graders, because I couldn't find anybody that really wanted to do it, that, had the time and the effort and the experience and all of that. So I was like, yeah, sure, fine. So when the girls were all 6th grade, that was a piece of cake. I mean, there's sixth grade girls, they're just crazy anyway, but there's not a whole lot to them. So it's not that big a deal. And, they ran around, jumped up and down the screen, all yelled, played basketball, and we beat the hell out of everybody. So that was fun. So 7th grade was the next year, and they're a little bit older, and, girls start changing various ages and so forth and so on. And so you started noticing that some were different from others and all of that. But, it's basketball, primarily basketball, whatever. When them girls hit 8th grade, my God, it was like the worst thing I ever did. Because first of all, I had to move all the practices to a private gym, because if there was one boy anywhere around, they couldn't think straight, much less play basketball. And then, the same little girls that like to come over and, give you a hug and talk to you and hold your arm and this and that. Now these were like young ass little freaking women that looked like not quite young ass looking women. And, I literally had to have meetings with the parents and stuff and go, hey, I know them, they know me. We all know each other, all's good. But, these little grown ass women, they need to kind of calm their little shit down, because, it's not going to be a problem for me, but the perception is, and anymore, it's all about the perception. So, you have to look at that. And then at that age, that's a whole other animal.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut into the last
part.
You're fine. I got excited. Okay, so the three of you have all kind of justified, and ironically, the three of you are all teachers in some capacity. You do different things where you teach people. So the three of you have kind of justified that, yeah, there's a gray area there. You can't be so cut and dry, brother. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So what's the difference then between a teacher sleeping with a student and a member of clergy sleeping with a member of their ...
congregation? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
it's age. I think it's age is the biggest thing.
Yeah. The consent and the criminality that can happen because of the lack of consent from a legal perspective is a possible issue, but also the power and control abuses that go on. I mean, obviously, if it would be within a church, that would be more of a spiritual type of abuse. And then if it would be, like in a romantic type of setting, a teacher to a student, that would be possibly psychological abuse, emotional abuse, and there could be others. So, but it just in general, the weaker, the younger, the less mentally advanced, however you want to state it, would run the potential risk, I think, of being preyed upon, essentially.
Well, if you go, I mean, you can always go Catholic Church, because that's just so easy. But, within the Catholic Church, it's been going on for, thousands and thousands of years, and it was overlooked and people were moved around, and, it was one of those things that shouldn't happen. And, we'll pray on it and make it go away, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And I mean, you hear about people, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later that, are having all kinds of issues and drama because of things that happened when they were, involved in the church, 1,000 years ago, not 50. I mean, 40, 50 years ago. But I mean, it's been going on forever and a day. Does it make it right? No. Did it take place? Yes. But then you can go back and look at the other side, look at the number of people that overlooked it and let it go. And then you can come as clear as today when you look at the whole Jeffrey Epstein and whatever her name is. I can't think of her name right now. It's in jail. Yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Yeah. You can look at that, and she's literally got the book, that she wrote of all of these people that were obviously way above the age of, they should know better, with non-consenting. And consenting is a legal thing as well as a physical thing and a personal thing. You know, if you're under the age of 18 in some states or under the age of 17 or 16 in some states, you can't give consent. But how does a 40, 50, 60-year-old, you know, man or woman make that happen, knowing damn well what they're doing was wrong, and then be amongst their own peers who turn a blind eye and let it happen?
I
So we
want to
go,
ask a question, but I want to hear from January Ginger before I want to make sure she doesn't have something to add on this.
I got lost in all of that.
Right? It was a bit of minutia, wasn't it? Okay, well then here's my question for all three of you. Black, white, or gray? Black meaning absolutely, this is cut and dry, the answer is no. White meaning, yeah, let it slide. Come on, let's for real now, seriously. And gray. There are situations in our society where an individual uses their power in order to sleep with someone. For example, if you are a drill sergeant or a general, there's no way a private is going to say no if you ask them to dinner. They realize that this is going to be a jeopardization, new word, of their military career, their professional career. They realize this would be a dumb thing to do. If you are a governor and your intern is not smart enough to realize that if you've asked them to dinner, they probably better go if they ever want to excel inside of the State House or the White House.
okay, so I got one for you.
Black, white, or gray? That's all we want to know on that question. Black,
I got one for
white,
you.
or gray?
I got one for you. Okay, Slick Willie, Bill Clinton, and his intern, Monica Lewinsky, and he was involved with her for quite a while. He never did get a complaint from her, and she never made the complaint against him. So obviously she had no issues with it. It was her best friend that brought that all to light.
Do you say black, white, or gray?
So in their mind, it was white because he had no issue, she had no issue. In her friend's mind, it was black because it shouldn't have happened and she should get paid for it.
But let me say
In
this.
other people's mind, it was gray.
Before we go forward on that, let me just say this. I have no interest in either one of the last two first ladies. I don't think that either one of them is attractive at all. But if I was put in a position to where I was told I better make some pancakes in my boxer shorts for one of these two first ladies, I'm down. I'd be stupid not to do that. Are you serious? You know what the benefits that could happen for my career? But if they're using that political power over me, it's wrong. No matter how old I am, the positions are so unequal that it's wrong. It's wrong to use a position of power and influence like that over a person, knowing that they can't have a recourse. They can't fight back with that. Okay, ladies.
Yeah, because
If
if you compromise on one level, then you realize they have you, and then there's another level on another level, and there's always another level. And actually right now, part of what we're dealing with in our society, which was just recently exposed, is that can literally go to the highest level of leadership in a country and the world and affect everyone's life as a result. So it's a really bad way to live life. And I'm specifically referencing Hunter Biden and his scandalous laptop, where he's got his own porn account that's been publicly broadcast to the world at this point. And he's on tape with minors. So he's been compromised by the CCP in this process because the CCP has copies of all of this. And he also has, there's pedophilia because these were minors, and drugs and just all sorts of stuff. And I'm not even ultimately blaming him because there's always a story behind the story. Who knows? The way that his father is, it could be that his father basically trafficked him and he didn't have a choice. To your point, Ace, right? he might have thought, oh, well, this will buy me something. And then he's got a family to feed. And this is his world. This is what he grows up in, a very corrupt world, arguably, but that's his world. That's what he knows. So in his mind, it's okay, but that doesn't make it okay.
There is, real quick, I didn't forget about you, January Junior. You're on the top of my mind. Hold it, hold it. There is a story about Michael Jackson, who I love dearly. But the more I hear the stories that he would hire families' children to come with him to his house for 3 or 4 days. And when you get to the house, there's cookies, cakes, donuts, roller coasters, llamas, ponies. It does sound like an abuse of power. It may not be pedophilia. There's nothing that proves that what he did was pedophilic, except that that's such a gross abuse of power, don't you think? Like, you know, a 12-year-old boy with cancer is gonna freak the fuck out if you got a roller coaster in your backyard. Your thoughts?
Yeah, train back there too.
He could have been very immature in a lot of ways. I think just knowing the little that I do about like how he was kind of raised, and there's speculation that there might have been some abuses that went on in the family. So maybe he felt comfort because, you know, I'm an aunt, and, you know, when I'm around my niece or nephews, I know like just there's that feeling like of kind of unconditional love and joy and happiness and everything. And there's something really vital about being around children. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you're not hurting them. And it's energizing. So maybe he found that was kind of one of the only safe places for him, but it doesn't make it right, because you need to be able to have adult friends in plethora. I mean, if you're going to have 10 children friends, you need to have at least 10 adults.
I love it. Yes, I agree.
Of course, the people around him were making that happen too, though, right?
Well, here's the thing. Okay, if January's not going to jump in there, then I'm going to jump in.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to jump in because then people talk over each other. You know what I mean?
Okay, you have the floor.
I just think that I'm going to go along with what she said. Michael Jackson was very, very young when he became famous. So I believe that his childhood may not have been very childlike. And so those things may have brought him joy, even in his adult life, because maybe he felt incomplete. But I don't know. And the stories that we're told, we're not going to know the whole truth behind all of that. So
I agree with both of you and everyone. Here's a story about Mary Kay Letourneau. Mary Kay Letourneau met her student victim when he was 12 years old. First, I want to ask the ladies, is there ever any justification for romantic feelings for a young man that's under 16 at your age? I mean, when you're over 21, what type of relationship can you have with a 12-year-old that somehow leads to romantic feelings? I mean, we were speaking on the other show about game. Is it that this 12-year-old, ladies, did he just have so much game that she just couldn't resist? She couldn't help herself? This kid was that suave?
Well, it's interesting. She was involved with the political system as well. And when you get into politics, we didn't get to talk about this on a point earlier, but the Catholic Church, you know, a lot of people don't know, or they do now as a result of the expose with Jeffrey Epstein, is basically the centerpiece of a worldwide human trafficking ring. So that explains the historical pedophilia that's gone on, because we're talking, to your point, Eric, you know, like literally hundreds of years.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, or thousands even. And so it's actually ritualistic abuse even, and we could go further, but I won't. So yeah, that ties into politics, because they abuse the rights of the protections of the so-called church to hide the crimes, and they liaison with political figures throughout the world, and they compromise them through this kind of honeypot, if you will. And they yeah, so this woman, I'm gonna guess based on some of her history and her political affiliations, I think her brother was part of BlackRock or something, that she probably had some early exposure to that. And so she probably got somehow twisted up in her thinking. And for her, love is love. It's not age discriminatory. And when you have like power at your fingertips where you're not being taught properly and conditioned properly by parents, I mean, I'm going to guess that's probably what happened.
Interesting. January?
Yeah, I understand young love, but I think young love should be young love with another young love. I don't agree with someone that is so much older with someone that's only 12. I don't agree with that. I don't understand it. But again, I don't know what's going on in the mind of Mary, and so I don't know anything about her. I don't know why that happens. It happens a lot. So
Yeah, and interestingly enough, most of the cases that I researched to schedule this show of teachers sleeping with students were women who were arrested for sleeping with a boy under 18, usually 16, 15, 14, 12. One story that was in the very popular news was about a teacher who had gotten pregnant with the baby from her student, and then went to jail, got out of jail, reunited with this student, and they're still married to this day. But she's 15 years older than this individual. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, boys are stupid. So if a woman,
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
if a woman's attractive and she shows that affection to a kid who's coming out of puberty and he's excited about this and that, and he thinks that, you know, it's going to work out in his best interest for one way or the other, not saying that it's right. Don't be misquoting me. You know, he will allow things to happen, but you know, he's not intelligent enough, smart enough, developed enough to even know what the hell's going on. But she is, and she intentionally is using him for whatever it is. And you know, that's where the question of the day is. But yeah, you know, boys are stupid. So
Well, I've had guys that were significantly younger than me. They were legal, I promise. Tried to, date or whatever. And I've had them lie to me about their age to the point where I'm like, okay, show me your driver's license because I've lost a little track. And then it makes it awkward because you have to like walk yourself back and be like, but yeah, and you know, so I've had to just ask those questions, and I think it really shows like a real big problem. Like, it's not good on us as women in this society where there's a lot more of that. And in my life coaching, sometimes my biggest clients are actually men dealing with psychotic women. Okay, like, not to make it sexist or that I'm anti-women, but like, women have gotten, you know, pretty bad. And, you know, like, both sexes have a lot to work on in my observation with just their mindset about things. But yeah, so, you know, I think whoever is, to your point, Eric, like the older of the two, you need to be able to have those adult conversations. Like, I had to put the brakes on with somebody early on when we met through friends, and it was like all copacetic, and it just kind of happened, and he was inviting me out on a date, and I wasn't really thinking about it. And then we're finding out each other's ages, and I'm like, so I had to just say, okay, look, do you know even what you want out of life? And just ask some of the more adult questions. Okay, we need to end this, okay, and move on. But yeah, it's a maturity thing, and unfortunately, we live in a society which is encouraging actually emotional immaturity through, back to our talk we did on artificial intelligence and technology, because everybody's just so superficially developed on their Instagram profiles, but in their personal lives there's just so much lacking, so much substance.
Anyone else? Here's a question then. Who do you think loses the most when it all comes out, when everyone finds out about the teacher-student love affair, the teacher-student hidden baby up in Maine somewhere? Who loses the most credibility, the teacher or the student?
Well, it has to be the teacher, because the student has the immediate, once he or she realizes what they've done, was wrong, they were too immature, whatever, there's a lot of forgiveness that comes for them. But the older person involvement obviously has no excuse at all and should know better. So they're going to always lose.
Yeah, I would agree. I would just add, though, that it's not to say that the younger person involved would be immune to the situation, because teenagers are just outright brutal these days, especially on social media. They get they get a hold of that kind of information, they sensationalize it, and they can just be horrible to one another and really devastate somebody from somebody's social fabric. So you could argue that it actually could be more detrimental to somebody at a young age who couldn't weather that kind of peer pressure in the same way that an adult could.
Well, I think you're right in terms of it would be more harmful to them, sociology wise and emotionally wise. But in terms of, what he said when the word he used was detrimental, it would be detrimental for the older person. But, here's something to think about. If you go back and, if you remember the movie, Mrs. Robinson, my God, people thought that was the greatest thing in the world, because Mrs. Robinson was chasing after, the youngins. And that was not necessarily a bad thing if you go back and look at the way it was perceived at the time. Now, had it been the other way around, if Mrs. Robinson hadn't been Mrs. Robinson, had it been Mr. Robinson going after the younger girl, the world would have exploded. Of course, they wouldn't have made a movie out of it either.
Eric just single-handedly defined why we have this problem, because of Mrs. Robinson and the social conditioning that came by way of that movie to teach us that it was okay.
Yeah.
Cougar Central.
And I want to add actually a confession. My name is Ace, and I have looked at porn. And in these last few years, I've looked at porn where they have introduced a qualification called a MILF. And I didn't know anything about a MILF a few years ago, but then I realized that, that means a woman who's older that is still considered sexual and active. And then came the cougars, and then came the milk chocolates and all the different ones. There's different ones, trust me. So the point is, where do we get to in our society where we finally come to the last question, which is, provided that it was not illegal, have you ever had the experience in your personal life where you met a teacher that you thought, you don't have to say whether you acted on the thought, but you thought, yeah, why not? I'm already learning a little biology. I might as well throw some chemistry into it too.
I can't remember.
Makes you wonder what goes through kids' minds these days, though, when you think about it. I remember having a crush on a teacher growing up, but my mind didn't go further than that, thankfully, because that would have created issues in my life, I think. The teachers when I grew up were always very respectful. Technically I've dated a professor, so but but yeah,
January.
that was so pathetic.
I know.
I guess I was just more, I wanted to hang out with my friends, and I didn't even really find interest in dating too much. So, and I was such a rebel, and I think that some of the teachers, probably most of them, didn't know how to handle me anyway. I was just mouthy. So I don't know. I guess I'm different. I don't think like that. I still don't. So there.
Whatever happened to you? Hey,
We need to-
whatever happened to
we
me?
need to do
I
a
never lucked out on that.
version and ask the same question with like some Gen Zers on and see what they say. You'd probably
Yeah.
be scared to death.
Well, now to that point, and we're going to run out of time, but to that point, we do live in a different generation where I'm an old man, I'm a grown ass man, as they say. So when I was in high school, you couldn't find your teacher on the internet because there was no internet. You could maybe, if you were lucky, you could find your teacher's address in the local yellow pages or the local white pages. That's the closest to the personal life of your teacher that you would ever get to. Maybe your teacher went to your same church, and so you saw them there. But there was a real closure between school time and personal time. Whereas now, everyone in every industry has got a Facebook page, an Instagram page. So you meet your waitress at the restaurant, and if you happen to catch their name, when you get home, you can just go Google it or Facebook it, and you can find that person and be like, hey, I was in the restaurant today. Remember, I was the one talking about Jell-O on my shirt? You get what I'm saying? We're out of time. I got time for one more question, and then the show has to be over. Dun, 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 dun. Who do you think perpetrates the fantasy love relationship more, the woman or the male in this teen fantasy of hot for teacher? Who do you think pursues it more when it actually happens? Is it the female student or teacher, or is it the male student or teacher that you think really pursues it the most?
I don't know if you heard me, but I said it depends on the time of the month.
I know nothing about that, so I just know that it's funny. That's all I'm going to say.
I think you have to take it each one individually to understand that.
Yeah, I think it's individual for sure.
On a side note, before I run out completely out of time, I've been watching this mini series called A Teacher with the actress Kate Mara, and she's a good actress. She's really good. And anyway, this show is about a female teacher who has a sexual relationship with a young teenage. Well, he's probably 18, but she's 36, so it's inappropriate. But they have this relationship. And anyway, the reason I brought it up is because as I watched the show, I like the acting. She's been in a lot of things. She's a very good actress. But for me, I always go back to the same question in my mind, which is, what would motivate a woman who's married for 10 years? She's a teacher. She knows as soon as people find this out, she's going to at least go to jail for a little while. She's going to lose the right to teach anywhere in the state. Why would she be so compelled to have a relationship with a young boy knowing she'll lose so much? That's my last question. What are your thoughts? Is it the D? Eric, you look like it was the D. Is that what you were going to say? Is it the D?
No, I wasn't going to say anything. I'm just listening, But, okay, I am going to say one thing. Okay, 36 and 18, if you're in certain countries, that's a very normal thing.
Okay.
I mean, so is 38 and 10, depending on which country we're talking about.
Well, that's true because, you could go that route. Is it acceptable? That's what we're saying, whether or not it's acceptable or not, but it's a normal thing. If it's if a 30-something, 40-something-year-old man chooses to take a 18, or a 16 to 24-year-old woman as a bride, concubine, mistress, side chick, whatever, and nobody complains, then I guess it's not a problem, or it's like an arranged marriage or an arranged deal. So again, it depends on the circumstances and the location and, what's actually involved, and is there actually something there, or is there just perception? So I don't know. I
I think that's a difference between what the laws allow and what's humane. I think that there's a lot of human rights abuses going on with this issue around the world. I don't think a 10-year-old female should be, subject to being married to some 38-year-old guy. I think that's disgusting. I mean, in the state of California recently, the bill SB 145 was passed, which a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, it didn't legalize pedophilia. Okay, wait, hold up. It allows for a 10-year age gap. So on the subject of teachers, if you're a 24-year-old teacher and you happen to be teaching a 15-year-old student and it's considered consensual, quote unquote, then who determines that, first of all, the teacher or the younger person? Can the teacher not brainwash the student into believing it's okay? Sure, they can. They have that mental, psychological potential control over the student. Also, if the student wants to get good grades. So, so we're being conditioned as a society, I think, to accept this blurring of healthy boundaries and what should be societally acceptable and what should not be societally acceptable. I mean, what does a person that's still in high school know about life? Like, these are the kinds of questions that should be asked in whether these are okay, because if that person gets, for instance, pregnant and it determines the rest of the course of their life because of that decision at 15 versus when they're more fully conscious and aware of who they are as a person, what they want out of life, they've had a chance to go to college, live a little, experience a little, then they could more consciously say, yes, this is a consensual decision. But you see, the law is making that determination rather than the individual in the state like California. And I don't think that's right, just because it's the law.
Well, that's where the whole issue between illegality and immorality come in. And that's the big one right now. When they passed that law in California, I mean, most of the country cringed because they're like, oh my God, are we not still fighting over Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell? And here you are passing a freaking law that allows a 14-year-old to give consent when, in most states in the country, that would never, ever, ever be allowed to happen, much less tolerated. So, and that's what scares a lot of people to death.
Yeah, I'm sorry not to talk over you, but just to, that's why they did it too, was to, one, cover themselves for possible past, what would otherwise
be the scary part
activities, and also to cover for future, because this goes back to the trafficking, because what they do now is they groom the 15-year-olds and the older teens to then groom even younger ones. So then they, a 15-year-old to then solicit sex with like a 6-year-old. It's so bad. Yeah, it's very similar what they did with the whole gang initiative and the the minors. It's like you could take a 17 or 18-year-old, gang affiliated person and have them help develop your 12, 13, 14-year-olds to get them that level. And then when the 18-year-old became old enough to be involved with the adult penal system, then he would already have the younger ones that are still perpetuating the situation without the consequences that the older ones would have. So it's the same thing. The sex trafficking is exactly the same thing. If you can find the girls, this is like legit. If you find the girls 18, 19 that have been involved with that, they will find you the ones younger that will take their place. So, they basically, you hate to say it, they're basically moving up in management and bringing the next generation of workers in behind them, which is crazy, but people don't even understand. A lot of these children that are trapped, they live what looks like from the outside normal lives. They'll go to school, they'll have friends, they'll have boyfriends, they'll have families, but then they'll let's say scoot off for like an hour or two after school with their, for lack of a better term, like their pimp, and they'll be pimped out, and then they'll go back to their normal life, and they don't even know they're trafficked in a lot of cases. Yeah.
We've got to close the show. I want to thank everyone for being a guest on the show today. I also wanted to throw in, just on this note, it's kind of on this note and it's kind of like on some whole nother stuff, but people may or may not know that Sacagawea As we were kids, we heard the story about Lewis and Clark and how she was very willing to help them forage their way across the countryside because she was just such a helpful Indian lady like that. But she was a teenager at best. She was probably 13 years old, and she had a physical romantic relationship with William Clark, and eventually married William Clark. And she couldn't have been much older than 13 when she married William Clark. So let's say, for shits and giggles, let's say she was 16. And that's still funky and wrong. But that's part of our history that we don't really talk about. I mean, we've got to remember that as it's 2020 right now, 100 years ago, it was completely fine for a man to grab a 14-year-old girl and say, "You're going to be my wife and you're going to like it." And that was the law, and that was fine. Anyway, we're out of time. I want to thank my guests. January Ginger was with us tonight, and Dorothea, guys, and my man, Eric Kelly. And if you ever want to be on the show, please do. We'd love to have you. We want to hear your thoughts, opinions, suggestions, convictions, beliefs right here on the Sunday night edition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
job,
you.
everybody. Great job. Excellent. Muy excelente. All right. So that's done. We will edit the show. It will run the first weekend of January. And that's what's up. January Ginger, can I call you right now? I got to tell you some stuff that
Yes.
I've already told other people. So I don't need to repeat
Sure.
it to them because they already know. So I'll call you in a few minutes. Dorothea, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Eric Kelly, for your first time, bro. Not bad. No, I'm kidding. You did great. Thank you so much.
All right, man. Have a good one.
All right. Good night, y'all.